Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story: as the U.S. and allies boost readiness in case of conflict with China, Beijing is pulling out two new tools. One of them capable of cutting information superhighways at the bottom of the ocean, and the other able to hide at the deepest depths of the planet. Senator Steve Daines sending a message to China's number 2 official: stop sending fentanyl to the U.S., then we'll talk tariffs. America's top telecom watchdog launching an investigation into 9 Chinese tech firms. Details on the growing Chinese cyber attacks the agency is fighting.
They tapped into our telecommunications to spy on us. They stole the innovations of technological research and breached the cloud systems holding government emails.
And House lawmakers push to shine a light on hidden gifts from China to U.S. colleges and universities.
We know that the Chinese Communist Party is not giving money to these institutions for nothing.
Before we dive into today's top story, we'd like to share an important update. You can now catch China in Focus on Guanxing World every Tuesday instead of YouTube. We'll publish the link in the description box down below at that time, or you can search China in Focus at guanxingworld.com. Washington's biggest rival, China, is flexing its muscles, this time on battlefields at the bottom of the sea. 2 recent reports reveal that China invented a machine that can sever almost any undersea cable in the world, as well as a new robot that can dive to the lowest point on Earth's oceans. Both of the new tech advancements appear to have been created with the Pentagon's strategic assets in mind, including a defense linchpin, the territory of Guam. The development of tools capable of damaged deep-sea infrastructure is a rarity, even for superpowers like China, but a report reveals that a new Chinese cable cutter could become the Achilles heel for 95% of the world's underwater cables, including the most fortified cables encased in steel and embedded in the deep seabed. And that's a big problem. Undersea cables serve as information superhighways. They connect countries around the globe. 95% of the world's data travels through them, including more than $10 trillion worth of global transactions per day. Severing those links can prove disastrous, like when 13,000 people in the Matsu Islands off the coast of Taiwan were effectively cut off from the internet for nearly 2 months in 2023. That's after 2 Chinese vessels damaged the undersea cables that connect the islands to the outside world. Back to China's new cable-cutting technology, it will likely be paired with Chinese vessels, submarines, undersea drones, and robots. The news follows accusations that Chinese vessels maliciously damaged undersea cables owned by Germany and Sweden. The Chinese Foreign Ministry rejects those allegations. According to top Chinese scientists who specialize in undersea tech, China's new equipment is designed for civil uses like undersea mining. However, its powerful capabilities have sent chills through nations around the world, given the critical role of the cables and potential risks to them. Hong Kong news outlet the South China Morning Post broke the news. The report specifically mentioned that the device poses a threat to military bases in Guam. But why? The U.S. territory of Guam is situated at the heart of the Pacific Ocean and heavily relies on undersea cables for communication. It's also a key choke point in the Pentagon's plan to counter China. But that's not all. Another piece of Chinese tech is also making waves. China also introduced a deep-sea robot around the same time, and the Chinese research team behind it has already put it to the test, sending it down to the deepest depths of Earth's oceans, the Mariana Trench. What's more, it's located just 200 miles southwest of Guam. The robot has made successful dives 35,000 feet down, hitting the deep ocean floor and managing complicated tasks while down there. And just for perspective, the deepest part of the Mariana Trench is the equivalent of more than 24 Empire State Buildings stacked on top of one another. Could the new tech give China dominance over undersea infrastructure? The short answer is no. An Australian think tank last year reviewed submarine technology from the U.S., Russia, and China and concluded that the U.S. holds a 50-year lead. The Pentagon continues to pour huge amounts of money in this field every year, making U.S. submarines the most difficult to detect in the world. Stop the flow of fentanyl to the U.S., then we'll talk tariffs. That's the message to the Chinese regime brought by Senator Steve Daines, the first U.S. politician to visit Beijing since President Trump took office. His visit comes as Trump said Chinese leader Xi Jinping may visit the U.S. in the not-too-distant future. Trump has imposed a 20% tariff on Chinese goods. Beijing retaliated by slapping 15% duties on American chicken, wheat, and corn. Before any tariffs negotiations, Daines said he made one thing clear to China, that Trump needs to see China stop the flow of fentanyl precursors first, not slow down the flow, but completely stop it. Most fentanyl precursor chemicals come from China, which get sent to Mexico for processing. From there, they enter the U.S. through the southern border. Last year, the DEA seized over 55 million fentanyl pills and almost 1,000 pounds of fentanyl powder, enough to lethally dose the entire U.S. population. Senator Daines met with China's premier and vice premier over the weekend.
On this visit, of course, we're at a time when we have important issues to discuss between our two countries.
Daines was accompanied by the CEOs of microchip maker Qualcomm, medical device maker Medtronic, and shipping company FedEx. The senator was heavily involved in negotiations over U.S.-China trade during Trump's first term. The top U.S. telecom watchdog is investigating 9 Chinese tech companies to find out if they are still operating despite sanctions. Those firms include Huawei, ZTE, China Telecom, and China Unicom. Washington has blacklisted them over national security concerns. This comes as the Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, is combating Chinese cyber attacks. Chinese hackers tracked the locations of millions of Americans after breaching major telecom providers in the U.S. 9 companies fell victim, from AT&T to Verizon. Rob Joyce is the former director of cybersecurity at the National Security Agency, the intelligence arm of the Pentagon. He recently testified that Chinese hackers had pre-positioned malware inside U.S. power grids, pipelines, and water treatment plants.
They tapped into our telecommunications to spy on us. They stole the innovations of technological research and breached the cloud systems holding government emails.
Joyce noted all of this is designed to create societal panic in the U.S., which Beijing can ramp up at will. From spreading propaganda under the guise of cultural exchange programs to stealing intellectual property, lawmakers say American universities and colleges are getting bribes from countries of concern. To bring the issue to light and stop the flow of cash, House lawmakers will vote on the Deterrent Act. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has the story.
House Republicans are pushing a bill to shine a light on hidden gifts, notably from countries of concern, like China.
That the CCP aggressively pushes its propaganda worldwide to try to reshape global narratives in its favor, and it has tried to infiltrate virtually all facets of American society.
Under the Deterrent Act, higher education facilities would have to report all gifts from countries of concern, while the foreign gift reporting threshold for other countries would be lowered from $250,000 down to $50,000. Congresswoman Virginia Foxx is a longtime sponsor of the Deterrent Act, spending years to get this message across.
We know that the Chinese Communist Party is not giving money to these institutions for nothing. They may be trying to get sensitive national security information. They may just be wanting to influence the way students think about the Chinese Communist Party in China.
Confucius Institutes are one example of such a transaction. And while the number of institutes in the U.S. have dwindled from 100 to just 5, other partnerships and contracts pose a threat. The Wall Street Journal reported that between 2012 and 2024, around 200 colleges and universities had around 3,000 contracts with Chinese businesses.
While it's true there could be an academic purpose for a partnership with a country like China or Russia, But these partnerships cannot come at the expense of our national security, research integrity, or future generations.
On Tuesday, a House vote is expected on the Deterrent Act. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
In the midst of the AI race with China, the Hollywood community is asking the government to rein in Silicon Valley and how it trains AI systems using copyrighted material. More than 420 Hollywood creatives signed an open letter to the government. That's in response to Google and OpenAI asking for more legal leeway on using copyrighted material to train AI. The tech companies argue lighter restrictions will help the U.S. maintain its AI dominance over China. On the other hand, the entertainment industry says companies need to pay for what they use, and that relaxing copyright laws for the sake of AI would eliminate revenue streams for creatives. The letter follows an intense fight last year over a similar issue, pushed by actors union SAG-AFTRA. In the end, a more than 100-day strike ended with Hollywood producers agreeing to guarantee certain AI use rights. The latest dispute started with a National Science Foundation request for comments on an American AI action plan. Next, we pivot to China's critical minerals and America's dependence on them. These minerals are used to make everything from smartphones, electric cars, and home appliances to missile defense systems. Last week, President Trump signed an executive order to expand domestic production of critical minerals. This is to avoid U.S. reliance on imports from China. NTD's Jack Bradley spoke to Paul Mueller, Senior Research Fellow at the American Institute for Economic Research, for more.
Well, there's certainly the national security angle in terms of if we do get into conflict with China, whether cold or hot conflict, they're not going to be very eager to trade these minerals and that we use for all kinds of military technology as well as domestic technology. So there's some independence there. But the other piece is that this really fits with Trump's agenda to make America great again and increase manufacturing. He's pushed for lower energy prices. He's pushed for deregulation. There's going to be a big tax battle on Capitol Hill to continue and extend the Trump tax cuts. All of that is very pro-growth. And I think this executive order by Trump is in many ways sort of signaling that the administration wants to undo a serious problem we have in the United States, which is that our environmental regulations have become so strict that it's basically infeasible or impossible to create new mines, to go after these rare earth metals, which is a complicated, difficult process. China, they don't really care what their environmental standards are, and they have all kinds of health issues, and they just kind of progress anyway. The U.S., I think, has a chance to do this much better by still having some environmental regulations, but cutting out a lot of them will make it feasible, but also cleaner and safer than in China or other parts of the world. And it also, will stimulate industry and economic development. So again, I think on the surface here, initially, this is a very positive development.
Coming up, a look at China's global ambitions and its police outpost on U.S. soil. Lawmakers are making an effort to shut them down, but is it enough? Details on one expert's proposal.
We could close Chinese consulates, which we should do anyway, because they're also violating the terms of their status in the United States.
U.S. Defense Chief Pete Hegseth makes his first trip to the Indo-Pacific. Details on what's topping his agenda. And the U.S. kicking off massive drills with its treaty ally, the Philippines, which two countries are aiming to improve with an eye on China. More on that after the break here on China in Focus. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Lawmakers making an effort to combat China's secret police in the U.S. NTD's Jack Bradley spoke on Friday to Gordon Chang, author of Plan Red, China's project to destroy America, to find out more about the Chinese Communist Party's global ambitions.
Gordon Chang, thank you very much for joining us here today.
Oh, thank you.
House lawmakers are seeking to crack down on China's secret police stations in the U.S. This effort's called the Expel Illegal Chinese Police Act, which would let the president sanction or restrict anyone involved with these stations. Now, first, how are these stations operating, and what have we learned about them?
Well, we know that the FBI closed down one of these stations in Chinatown in New York, but according to various reporting from the New York Post and the Daily Caller, there could be 7 to 9 more of these, and they're spread throughout the United States. So we know that these exist. We know that they provide services that violate the terms of the Vienna Convention. We know that they're violating our sovereignty. And in some of these cases, we know that Chinese agents are violating American law by their activities from these police stations. And the fact that we've allowed this to continue for so long really says a lot about us. So this issue now is not so much about China, although China's activities are unacceptable. It's really about us for permitting this to continue.
These police stations are known to carry out illegal intimidation tactics. How does this undermine U.S. sovereignty?
Well, we know that they go after ethnic Chinese, not only Chinese nationals who are in the United States, but also American citizens of Chinese descent. And they intimidate and coerce them by saying that they will act against relatives back in China. So that's one of the things that they often do. And that means that they get ethnic Chinese to commit acts of espionage and to do other things that are against our interests and violation of our law. And we know this practice has been going on for decades.
And just yesterday, a New York businessman was sentenced for trying to repatriate alleged fugitives and dissidents to China. Now, it's part of an initiative being called Operation Fox Hunt. What is the Chinese Communist Party's end goal here?
They want to prevent people from leaving China by convincing everybody that there are no safe havens in the world. And of course, this also tars the United States' reputation as being the home of the free and the land of the brave. So clearly what they're doing is they're, first of all, acting against their own citizens, but then they're also got a broader propaganda goal.
Now, why are these overseas operations an important part of the Chinese Communist Party's strategy?
Well, China's goals is to rule the world, not control, not dominate, not to exert hegemony over, but to rule the world. And so what these are outposts, an intermediary step in that. I mean, China wants to convince everybody that it has the right to do whatever it wants, wherever it wants. And so far, they've been pretty good at intimidating people because it's not just the United States, it's other democracies as well. So China is along its goals of being able to exert not only influence, but its laws in other countries.
And what can the U.S. do to proactively counter these efforts?
Well, first of all, we can close these police stations, but we also need to either imprison or expel those who have been a part of this. And we could do other things which are asymmetric. So, for instance, tariffs. Or we could close Chinese consulates, which we should do anyway, because they're also violating the terms of their status in the United States. So there are a lot of things that we can do. We got the range of it. China has many, many points of contact in the United States. We can cut those points of contact, as we should anyway.
And you mentioned tariffs. How effective can tariffs be to counter Chinese influence?
I think it can be extremely effective. Xi Jinping has turned his back on consumption as being the basis of the Chinese economy, which means he has only one plan to rescue a grim situation, which is to export more. The United States is the world's biggest market. It cannot be replaced in the short or even in the intermediate term. So basically, Xi Jinping has put his fate and the fate of the regime in the hands of the United States. And we should be exercising that power because the Chinese have given it to us. And why we don't is beyond me.
House lawmakers have also introduced the Block Organ Transplant Purchases from China Act. Now, this is to ensure that Americans are not unknowingly complicit in Beijing's systematic forced organ harvesting targeting prisoners of conscience. What message does this send to the Chinese Communist Party?
Well, I think the United States should block all organ transfers of Americans in China, just because it's wrong. We know that virtually all, if not all, of these organs are obtained under conditions which would violate medical ethics and laws in other countries. There should be no American getting an organ transplant in China. So it shows to the Chinese that we're not really that serious. I mean, we haven't even enacted this, even though we've known this practice has been going on for decades. This is grisly. This is gruesome. This is basically a crime against humanity, and we have let it continue.
Gordon Chang, thank you very much for your insights here today.
Thank you.
Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth took off from Andrews Air Force Base on Monday, embarking on his first trip to the Indo-Pacific. Hegseth is traveling to Hawaii to meet with the region's commanding officer before making stops in Guam, the Philippines, and Japan.
The defense secretary posted footage of his departure on X. The Indo-Pacific, he said, is our priority theater, and we're strengthening our deterrence, readiness, and alliances. Continuing, we will lead with strength, resolve, and purpose. Talks with his Filipino counterparts will include increasing deterrence against Chinese aggression in the disputed South China Sea. In Japan, Hegseth is scheduled to participate in a ceremony marking the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Iwo Jima. He's also expected to meet with Japanese leaders and American military personnel.
The U.S. and the Philippines kicked off 3 weeks of joint military drills in the Philippines on Monday.
The drills focus on defending territories and enhancing operations between the two countries' armies. This comes as Chinese Coast Guard vessels have upped their aggression in the South China Sea. That's by ramming Filipino boats and firing water cannons at them. More than 60% of global maritime trade passes through the South China Sea. Both China and the Philippines claim the region, though Beijing claims almost all of it. An international court ruled China's claim invalid back in 2016.
Japan is taking issue with how the Chinese regime described a recent meeting between the Japanese Prime Minister and China's Foreign Minister.
The Chinese Foreign Ministry claimed Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba said that Japan respects the positions elaborated by the Chinese side. Japan's Foreign Ministry says Ishiba never said those words. The statement did not specify what positions were at issue, but the Chinese side said there were discussions of Taiwan mentioned. Japan's chief cabinet secretary said Japan lodged a protest and requested the alleged statement to be removed, calling it not factually accurate. Japan has close ties to Taiwan and does not agree with the Chinese regime's wish to control Taiwan, nor with the use of any forceful measures to do so.
That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. For round-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.